First, let me just say that there is no room in the Republican Party for anti-Semitism or white supremacy. And anyone meeting with people advocating that point of view, in my judgment, are highly unlikely to ever be elected President of the United States. Second, Senator Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, Leader McCarthy, and I had a meeting with the President earlier today to go over a range of issues that you're all familiar with here at the end of the session. The President indicated support for legislation on the rail strike issue, and I believe I heard Senator Schumer say we're likely to see that on the floor this week. Second, we had a robust discussion at lunch, and this will continue in the coming weeks over the way to end the session with regard to government spending. It's a difficult choice, frankly. If you were interested in reducing spending, probably the best way to do that would be a one-year CR. If, on the other hand, you're concerned about the defense of our country and the funding of the Ukraine war, you are somewhat hesitant to go in that direction. I have members in a variety of different positions on this. I think the way forward is to continue to discuss it and to see what's in the best interest of the country, see how many people we can bring together on both sides of the aisle, and to figure out how to finish up this year sometime before Christmas.
Well, there are lots of crises facing the American people, starting, of course, with inflation, the economy, energy prices, the southern border. But instead of dealing with those, the Democrats have insisted upon prioritizing, supersizing the IRS. Only in Washington, D.C. would an agency that has mishandled sensitive information, has an abysmal record when it comes to customer service, and a track record, I might add, of targeting taxpayers, be given enough resources to literally double in size and add 87,000 new employees. During the tax year 2021, the IRS answered just 11% of the calls that it received in their office, meaning that 250 million calls went unanswered. In the past 2 years alone, the IRS has inadvertently posted confidential information from 120,000 taxpayers and destroyed 30 million unprocessed tax documents. Despite this track record, the Democrats recently passed $80 billion for the IRS, that doesn't include any accountability for how that $80 billion is going to be used, and only 4% of it was actually allocated to improving taxpayer services. It is clear that the IRS is ripe for reform. I've introduced multiple bills to address this issue, one of which is with Senator Crapo, that would protect taxpayers who make less than $400,000 a year from being audited, something the Democrats have said that they are for. All this would simply do is make that clear. Senator Collins and I have introduced legislation that would prevent the IRS from hiring new enforcement agents until customer service has reached a more acceptable level. And Senator Grassley and I have introduced a bill that would give Congress a direct say in how those new IRS funds are spent by freezing that funding until the IRS submits a plan to Congress for approval. We can protect taxpayers in this country, and we can improve the IRS. But it certainly isn't by handing them a blank check for $80 billion and another 87,000 new employees. There needs to be transparency, there needs to be accountability to the American people, and we're going to insist that we get it.
I had a chance again this Thanksgiving to spend time overseas with Wyoming soldiers serving our nation. I do this every year for Thanksgiving. This year it was with 15 Marines and airmen and airwomen who are currently stationed in Okinawa, Japan, halfway around the world, eyeball to eyeball with communist China. And I go to thank them for the sacrifices that they're making and their families are making on behalf of our nation. I also go to hear from them, as well as the commanders in the field, the situation on the ground. And what I hear from them is that China is getting more aggressive, more assertive, and there are daily interactions and confrontations with communist China. Our soldiers are ready, they're able, and they're prepared to fight. But our president and the administration makes us less ready and less able and less prepared every day by surrendering our own strategic advantages as a nation. In the world economy, the universal currency is energy. And Joe Biden and the Democrats are forcing us to keep American energy in the ground. China knows that energy is a long-term weapon, and they gain strength, and they gain economic strength, they gain military strength by using all of their energy resources. And they're not going to commit economic or military suicide by showing concerns about the environment. There is a vast gap between energy and economic reality and Joe Biden's wishful thinking on energy, and that vast gap continues to grow. And just last week at the climate conference in Egypt, once again, China ate our lunch, and they weren't even attending. John Kerry, on behalf of the administration, offered to contribute to a UN and set up a UN fund, a slush fund for climate damage and paying reparations. And China, the world's largest polluter, is contributing nothing to that in terms of payment. Each day, Joe Biden and his climate-crazy globalist John Kerry continue to do great damage to our country, our economy, and our national security.
A few weeks ago, as we think now about the end of the Congress, a few weeks ago, the Rules Committee reported out the Electoral Count Act. One no vote, a huge bipartisan vote to vote that bill out of committee and make it available for the floor. Three things it does that are probably the most important. One is it further clarifies the role of the vice president in counting the electoral votes. Two, it takes 20% of the Senate and 20% of the House, as opposed to one House member and one senator, to challenge votes. And then it further clarifies some really disruptive language about state legislatures and what they would do about an undefined failed election. I think this is one of the pieces of legislation with that kind of bipartisan support we should be able to deal with this year before this Congress ends, and I hope we do.
This morning I talked with a couple folks back home in Red Oak, Iowa, and the weather is getting pretty nasty, miserable, cold, and unfortunately that means folks need to be heating their homes. And what we saw not too long ago was the Democrats in full force behind President Biden pass the Inflation Reduction Act. We haven't seen a decrease in inflation, and as a matter of fact, the cost of fuel has gone up. So for folks back home to heat their homes, they're facing extraordinary costs and bills. So what we've heard is that many Americans are actually turning their heaters off, and some have said it's like living in an igloo. This is tough times for Americans. And so what we need our Democratic friends to do is wake up and see that their energy policies are hurting American families. We have turned now to countries that are dictatorships, like Venezuela, to help ease the pain here in the United States, knowing full well that we have these resources literally at our fingertips. So Democrats, please wake up. President Joe Biden, please wake up. Let's utilize American resources and ease these burdens on American families.
So when I go home and talk to Floridians and I tell them that we have not even had budget meetings to go over budget, they're just shocked. As governors, we have to balance our budgets every year. I balanced the budget 8 years in a row, paid down debt. As governor of Florida, as a business person, you have to balance your budget. So they're surprised when we don't do it up here. Now we're stuck at the end of the year. Democrats have decided, whether they're going to do an omnibus or a CR. They're we're not going they're not going to let us know. Democrats won't let us know what's going to be in it, and then they're going to be expected to vote on something. That's clearly not the way our government ought to be run. On top of that, in Floridians, as Senator Thune said, they're frustrated with 87,000 more IRS agents. What are we going to do about that? They're frustrated that we have military members that are being kicked out of because they didn't get a vaccine. What are we going to do about it? So I think all these issues, we have a few weeks to go. I think all these issues we have to address, but we've got to start changing this process of not having budgets.
Leader McConnell. You characterized the consternation in your conference over the spending bills and the approach there, but what is the consternation in your conference about the Railway Act? Is it similar that there are these divides about going forward with this, not going forward? Can you characterize that?
Well, I think there are mixed views, and you'll just have to work a little harder and talk to our members about it.
But I mean, do you get the sense, though, that there are people who are adamant about voting against it?
You'll have to ask our members. I think some may be inclined to vote against it, and others are arguing that the economic price doing that is too great. And I think Senator Schumer will be out here shortly. You can ask him. I believe he intends to put it on the floor this week.
Leader McConnell, in light of what you said, that there's no room in your party for anyone who harbors these anti-Semitic views, if Donald Trump wins the Republican nomination, would you support him?
Look, let me just say again, there is simply no room in the Republican Party for anti-Semitism or white supremacy. And that would apply to all of the leaders in the party who will be seeking offices.
Leader McConnell, on the bill that's aiming to protect same-sex and interracial marriage, can you explain your positioning and where you stand on that? Are you a firm no against that bill?
I've been voting, and I'll be voting later this afternoon.
Leader McConnell, what do you say to members of your conference who say that Republicans should not pass an omnibus, should do a CR, so the Republican conference, so the House Republicans in charge of the Congress next year can put their own stamp on these?
Yeah, what I've said is if I were the majority leader, we would have passed the NDAA months ago. We would have grouped appropriation bills into minibuses so that we didn't end up at the end of the year with a massive bill and an unaddressed NDAA. The majority leader, I've been there. It's better being the majority leader than the minority leader. Gets to decide the order in which we do these things. And I believe that the current majority leader prefers balling it all up at the end. And that's what we've done again this year. I would not run it that way.
Leader McConnell, should anybody but Trump be the nominee?